right, we're rolling. And here we are. We are recorded live from RSA conference here in San Francisco. I'm Sean Martin, and you're very welcome to a new on-location episode. Just myself. Marco's not with me. He's back behind the scenes working on some things, and I get to have a nice one-on-one chat with Cassie Crossley. Cassie, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here in this wild crowd.
I know, it is a wild crowd. It's a good day, and I keep seeing faces walk by that I recognize.
Yes.
And the hugs are countless at this point.
That's right.
And so you've been on the show before. We had a nice long chat about your book, which is all about supply chain. We'll talk about that in a second. So I encourage everybody to listen to that. I'm interested to get your perspective on what you're hearing, what you're seeing with respect to supply chain this week, and we'll get into that. But first, a moment to share with the audience who Cassie is. What are you up to?
All right. Well, I have been with Schneider Electric. We're a large multinational company headquartered in Paris, France. And I've been with them for 14 years in various roles in the cybersecurity team for approximately 9 years, both on the cyber side, but also product security side. And I work with a lot of suppliers. We have over 54,000 suppliers and large customers, critical infrastructure, all sorts. And so we're really focused on product security and supply chain security. So last year I moved specifically into a role on supply chain security, which was right in line with the work that I was doing for secure development and software security, but also focusing a lot on hardware security too.
Because you didn't have enough going.
As I didn't have enough.
There's still the hardware stuff in there too, which obviously is a big piece of what Schneider does.
Yes.
I'm actually going to kick it off with this question, because product security, supply chain, providers, and then there's third-party risk.
Yes.
I'm just wondering what your view of these things are, because then there's open source, which is outside of anything you might build. Maybe, who knows, maybe you're building open source as well that you're sharing with the community. How do you view those parts? Because some are tech-driven, some are risk-driven. Of course, you have procurement involved, and then you have you're delivering stuff to the market as well.
Yeah, well, years ago, when people heard supply chain, they thought physical, right? And logistics and things like that. And then software supply chain became to sort of not known and not recognized, but there is a supply chain. And with that, you have the third-party risk, which could be open source or commercial or any of the above in combination. But also, as a OEM, we build, and we're a supplier, right? So bringing it all together. Now with, let's say 4 years ago at RSA, you wouldn't have heard the word software security. It was very IT, network security, and all of that. And I had actually worked with AppSec leaders, application security leaders, to create a digital book. And I said, I want to write about software supply chain security. And they were like, well, tell us about that. What is that? And I was like, well, and I go into the background of all this and how key it is that you're not only thinking about from a developer mindset, but everything that you build into it. So there's even logistics. When you think about physical logistics, especially IoT products and OT products, there's potential for integrity challenges, and how do you make sure it stays the chain of custody, which we've dealt with supply chain for years. But when it comes to software, the same kind of thing. And this was pre-SolarWinds, so I had recommended, I want to write this chapter. So by the time we released it, SolarWinds had happened, and all of a sudden it became a big thing that people started to recognize that term. And with the overall discussion, and now there's vendors, that are doing this software supply chain security, not only on the cloud and DevSecOps side, but also at all parts of really the dev cycle. And I really try to promote it's not just at that point. It's not a developer problem only. There can be, of course, situations like SolarWinds where somebody compromised that environment, but you also have to think about the people that are involved. You have to consider all of your suppliers. We're seeing every day, third-party suppliers being hit, and that can compromise the pipeline, which is much bigger than just a dev-centric area. And so I'm impressed with the growth that has been going around, but it's still not enough. We're not providing transparency. They may not even know all their suppliers. We just saw an XZ backdoor that was in open source, and that's happening more and more every day. They're ripe targets. And does the average developer, are we doing enough at other conferences and other places to bring up this topic? So when I talk with procurement, they understand a little bit about cybersecurity, but I wrote the book so that they can understand the bigger picture. When we're assessing suppliers, we may only be assessing them, do they have a CISO? But you really want to say, do you also use secure development and things like that in building all of that? And most of the time we're not asking those questions, or they don't even know how to assess if the answers are any good.
Yeah. Don't get me started on spreadsheets.
Yeah, yes.
I want to bring in the concept of corporate security as well, because my perspective is that corporate security also has responsibility for product security, and not everybody does the third-party risk and certainly the bigger supply chain view as well.
Right.
What your view on that role? Should some things kind of be separated out to really get a nice strong focus? Obviously, bigger the company, more a chance that happens. But what are your thoughts on that in general?
Well, I think it's partially education. When you're looking at, when you're coming at it from one view, especially a lot of those in IT and network security, they haven't been developers. They don't understand what to consider. But also, when they're actually looking at it, I think some of it goes back to the old conversation, what we used to, talk about all the time, business continuity and disaster recovery, and they understand that. Now a lot of people are, using the term resilience, and they're not really addressing that when they're making decisions from a corporate security standpoint. They're looking a lot at the threats, but not being proactive and looking at the risks up front. Like, what happens if Microsoft Teams goes down? You can't even run a war room on the fact that, this might be compromised and it's one of your key assets in the company and one of your crown jewels. So there's a lot more to go to discuss that on the resilience level. And it's not, it's from a third-party risk standpoint, it's, well, this could happen. Well, all of these things could happen, and how do you address it? Sometimes there's not a way to even be able to cover the resilience and that area. And that's where, from a cybersecurity, they need to be talking more with enterprise risk management and understanding the business. I'm still seeing a lot of companies not really, it's a separate, this is a technical discussion, and that's not the case. You really have to know what's important to your business by understanding the risks through the whole business pipeline. And speaking of pipelines, we saw that with Colonial Pipeline, right? I mean, it was the same kind of thing. Look at the impacts that it had. And so that's where cyber needs to think more about expanding, because they understand threats and risks, but they're applying too much of a technical lens to it.
I'm sad to hear that. Because all week and even leading up to the conference, as I've been chatting with folks, resilience has certainly been a common thread, and I've had a sliver of hope that meant we would look at things. Because the other thing I've heard is kind of probably everybody listening is you keep talking about this, but the CIO role, and the CISO role kind of coming together, and the CIO kind of leading the charge with security, really coming to be part of that.
Yeah.
So it's encouraging that I'm hearing that being spoken about, but I'm not quite convinced that it's actually happening.
Yeah, it's really not. I mean, I come from some Six Sigma background also, and as that, you're really looking at the whole business process, so business process management, and even CIOs and being in that field, they're not always tuned in either to what's key. They know where the money is spent, but sometimes the money is, is not as high dollar, but yet it's one of the most critical functions in the company, and they don't realize it.
Are we overthinking things? Are we making it too complex? Because my view is, you have an IT system, it needs to stay up and running so the water stays clean or the power stays on. That's resiliency. What are the areas where that can impact that? Security is one of those, right? Either the system's denial of service, or the data is compromised, or a sensor is offline, or its availability and integrity. And and confidentiality may be coming, but it's those two things. And I don't know. I feel that when we start talking about security, we just blow it out of the water, and it becomes really complex. I don't know.
Right.
What do you think?
And there are other frameworks and things that are really, I would say, expanding it. When you're on a show floor like this, it's really more about the technical innovation, and that's where this overlap really needs to happen more and more from a business conversation. I think that overall, when you're looking at those and addressing those concerns that you have as a company, it's not just the CIO and the CISO conversation or anything. It's really the CEO and the COO. And so there's a lot of conversations in the CISO realm about how to talk to the board. And it's really more about the business capabilities. And that's where you get that CIO and CISO together. And it's really growing from a standpoint of how do I continue to support all the revenue pieces, and what's my key driver on all of that. You should be able to, I know it's sort of, again, older thought, but really tie all those objectives in. And it's not about, well, how many people have endpoint protection or anything like that. It's, what's the impact and the estimated maximum loss, or those kind of risks that you might want to think about if something happens in that event. And so I think that there's areas, I've been working a lot with different customers, even like I'm on the technical side, I'm working on the software bill of materials and all of that, but it's so that they have that visibility and they can make the risk decisions. I don't know if they have 1 or 1,000 of those products, but they do. And so do they want to be able to prioritize, this information so that they can address the risk? And that's where we need to bring this a lot more together so that everybody is aware of more of their footprint, and things are right now hidden behind the scenes, and we need to bring it more up front.
Yeah, up front. I love it. Yeah. What's let's check the time here. What are you hearing here in relation to this kind of conversation? Because I think if security could speak to the business, they could speak not just risk, but to the availability, to safety is a big thing when you start looking at some of the critical infrastructure. We haven't even touched on OT yet, really. Right. What is some of the conversation? I know you're able to have book signings. I don't know.
I've got my book.
I know, I love it. Do people comment on where they think things are heading? Are you inspired by something or worried by anything?
This year a lot of conversation is on Gen AI, and I've been asked quite often on how it applies to software supply chain and those areas. And my response is, well, of course, people are going to leverage it for, nefarious purposes, but we and the overall industry should be able to make better use of making quick decisions using AI-driven technologies. I've seen more than just in name only, because we see it plastered everywhere.
The plus AI. Yeah.
Right. But it's definitely starting to make a difference where it's decision making and speeding up. You really want that efficiency. So any technologies that can drive efficiency and less false positives are going to, I think, over the next 2 years be more proven out. Okay. And that's what I want to see. I don't think in this case, like we saw with blockchain or some other ones, I don't think it's exactly a buzzword because we've done machine learning, but with the capabilities now, especially on the AI set, being able to have it learn your own business and at least do some of the basics. We're seeing this a lot in SOX.
You have an example?
Yeah, so in with SIMs and SOX and event management, they're able to, through proper training for your own businesses, because everybody's infrastructure is different, right? They're able to better and more quickly learn and adapt the events to be able to just say, from a behavior analytics, which we used to hear about, it's still the same kind of process to say, okay, this one, you can now set a policy, where it actually suggests we recommend this policy to be able to be accepted because every time you've done this, you've accepted it. There's no exceptions that you've done. So we're just going to make it a standard policy on it. So you won't even have to consider it, won't show up at all. So with events, same kind of thing. I mean, you get millions, if you're a large corporation, millions of events now on your event management system. So groups like this are able to read more quickly on what it is. And even just, as simple as having a developer who's managing or, in a DevSecOps or operations environment, instead of everything having to be, gone through a manual set of eyes, it quickly learns and can do that, which we've had it slowly where you have to do that, but now it's pretty quick and fairly dependable. I mean, you can do audit checks. So I'm seeing a lot of that's going to increase the efficiency because we have to be as fast as those that are coming against us and striking. So that's been a good conversation. And I talk a lot where application security folks, where we're using it to drive efficiencies. Right now, a lot of like Copilot and some of the different tools are being able to generate code, and it still has as many vulnerabilities as if human generated it. But over time, when you're training them, it's like training Sue or John right next to you to be improve over time, like a university student up to now a senior developer, but also be able to give them feedback quicker. Like we've seen it over the years where it had to be hand coded to say, here's the reason why, but now there's ways to give them that immediate feedback as it's being developed. So, what we call shifting left, but actually use AI technologies to be able to improve that. And as soon as we, with all of that, get better at finding those common weaknesses, the CWEs, and where the things are, we're going to see like entire classes of vulnerabilities that it's going to be able to detect like that. So I'm pretty hopeful.
So let me ask you this.
Yeah.
So I have a little bit of insight into some of the hardware development of things. And if I'm not mistaken, maybe it's not called AI, but there's certainly applications that are used to create chipboards and chips, and so machines are kind of doing that stuff for us already. Right. So it's not impossible to achieve it on the software side. So I don't know, what are your thoughts there?
Well, on the software side, there's so many nuances, right? When you're doing something at the hardware level or the chip level, you've got the concept of this reactivity, or so there's physics and science and all of that behind it. Cybersecurity, it's like trying to defend against 1,000 attackers within 1 millisecond. Like there's so many different ways that somebody's coming at you. And so overall, we're, on the hardware side, there's definitely improvements being done, and we're seeing that in various areas, detection capabilities and so on, but even development. You have, over years and decades, engineers, they really understand, they can do this, they can't do that, and more of those tools with the hardware design, it's going to be really easy to be able to say, no, that's a known issue, even in the development of hardware, or being able to create testing algorithms to be able to verify those hardware pieces. So, there's going to be a lot of improvements on that side too.
I love it. I love it. So I want to give you a moment. Software supply chain security. Right. I loved our chat. Maybe a quick word to the audience, some of the feedback you've received this week. I know you've connected with a lot of people.
Yeah.
What are you getting?
Well, I think that those of us, especially that come from I've met a lot of security engineers and those on the development side, and they're really excited to see that software supply chain security, unfortunately for reasons, like SolarWinds, but it's finally getting attention because those of us that are developers, we wanted to be able to spend the time on this kind of activity, and in fact, Microsoft just announced that they were going to refocus and put security first, and ahead of maybe feature sets. Yeah. That's going to be a big talk. So I've been hearing a lot about that. In regards to the book, I work a lot with startups and other companies, and they can't spend millions of dollars on security training programs or implement sophisticated GRC governance, risk and compliance controls, and I give 78 controls in the book, like, here's what you should focus on, this is what's important, this is how you should work with suppliers. So I tried to put it all in here so that a lot of people, I've been using it for reference. I look at it now for a reference to say, let me go back and see exactly how I explain that piece. So I am getting a lot of positive feedback. It's been a lot of fun.
I love it. I had Helen Patton on the show once, and she said something. I think I asked, why did you write the book? And she says, because I have so much here, I wanted to first get it down on paper, and I can't have that conversation over and over and over.
That's right. So I needed to scale it.
Here it is.
Yep.
Everybody enjoy it.
Yeah.
So, well, congratulations on
Thank
that,
you.
and I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us here today. Cassie Crossley, thank you all. He wants you to show the book.
All
Please
right.
show the book. There we go.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, producer.
All right.
And seriously, thank you so much. I hope you have a great rest of the show, and thanks everybody for joining us here on location at RSA Conference with ITSP Magazine. I'm Sean Martin. We'll see you around.
Great, thank you. Excellent, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.